Thank you so much, Mr. Loghani. Up next, we have Mr. Rajesh Magow, co-founder and Group Chief Executive Officer, MakeMyTrip. Under Mr. Magow's stewardship, MakeMyTrip has not only attained market leadership position in the space of air travel, but has also strengthened its dominant position in the underpenetrated online hotel space in India. He has also been one of the key contributors in multiple strategic fundraising activities, and he has played an instrumental role in the company's merger with the Ivibo Group.
Oh boy.
Interviewing Mr. Magow, we have Mr. Nikhil Nath, founder Vara 5, director Unifocus and Knowcross. In 2002, Mr. Nath started Knowcross, a hospitality software company, which became a leading provider of operations software to the hotel industry. Mr. Nath went on to sell Knowcross to a private equity fund in the late 2021. After a few years of managing his family office, he has decided to return to the hospitality world with an ambitious plan to create the world's leading luxury travel platform. Please give them a round of applause.
I don't know if Rajesh actually needs any introduction. You guys just saw the ad. But it's just been a fantastic story. I think it's something that makes all Indians very, very proud.
Thank you.
I still remember the day when Deep started. And from there to this, and the other 25 years in space, right? So it's quite a journey. So Rajesh, I think for most of us, I think what would be very interesting is if we just contextualize this, right? Today, MMT is a $10 billion market cap company. It has got the leading share of the Indian market, possibly the largest share that any company has of any single travel market, right? But if we go back in history a little bit, paint the picture for us of what 2005 looked like, just after you'd raised your round and you just launched the app, or the website actually, originally. What did that environment look like? Just paint that picture for us, and then let's contrast it to what's going on today.
Yeah, sure. Good morning, everyone. Happy to be back here again. While you, Nikhil, mentioned, and by the way, the embarrassing introduction, and let's keep that aside, but the happiest moment over the last 25 years, just from metric standpoint, is neither the $10 billion or any other sort of metric, but it's actually that metric, 80 million happy customers over the 20 years, because see, that is what eventually will make or break business, right? So, but just going back to the memory lane. So you talk about 2005. I mean, just because we're just completing 25 years on April 1st. We actually started in 2000. So the first 5 years were the toughest, the hardest. Of course, every startup goes through it. You've been an entrepreneur yourself as well, and you are actually going to now, go through that journey one more time. You would realize that. And we were clearly pre-sunrise at that point in time. Hardly any digitization, there's hardly any internet there. There was no ecosystem that existed. And I think it was Deep, and hats off to him, who made this bold move. And we realized, and we somehow survived. So let's not maybe talk too much about it, for another day, but the tremendous amount of learnings actually came from those 5 years. But in 2005 is when we, like you rightly mentioned, when we sort of relaunched, when few things started to happen. Little bit of digitization started to happen. Sky started opening up, low-cost carrier came in, railway booking platform, thanks to IRCTC, came in, and the travel and tourism market beginning to sort of open. Back in the days, if you look at 2005 stat, the travel and tourism market in India was about 15 billion, all told, 15 billion US. And today, after 20 years, it's about $65 billion. So the CAGR of about 7.5%, which is a very healthy CAGR, if you see over the last 20 years, has been phenomenal. Just to put things in context. So obviously India has, from a travel and tourism market size and scale standpoint, come a long way as well. And the other very important part of that, from our business model standpoint, was also the digitization, right? Today we are talking about India almost in many ways actually being the leader in sort of driving the digitization, but back in the days, none of it was existing. And therefore, there was huge amount of sort of heavy lifting that we needed to do and many other players who were sort of in the tech-enabled business model that they needed to do was non-trivial. And that is where a lot of the sort of focus, a lot of the hard work, a lot of the investments actually went into it. And as you see, and we've seen this obviously journey evolving from very, very close. As I look back, I mean, this is one of the, by the way, you saw the brand campaign ad, but some of there is an interesting campaign that we are out there in the market. Some of those hoardings in Gurgaon, you would see when we started, what level of digitization, what kind of internet bandwidth used to be there with interesting anecdotes there. And if you look back and seems like time flew, but I think India as a country from an overall travel and tourism market standpoint, India as a tech sort of in specifically from a digitization standpoint have come a really long way. And future looks almost like it's just the beginning, right? And while we've come a long way and and reached and achieved some sizable scale, but as we sort of see future, whether it is 25 years or 5 years or 10 years from now, it looks very, very bright. It actually almost looks like that you want to feel and be more younger today, because it's just the beginning. India is beginning to sort of explode. The outlook looks really, really positive. And like we say all the time, the best is yet to come.
So for the hoteliers sitting here, just to put this in perspective, in 2005, roughly what percentage of hotel sales in India would have taken place online?
Yeah, interesting question. Like I was saying, forget about hotels. Even for airlines, for airline booking and all that, it was zero online, right? Because I think and we would all be able to relate with it, especially people who are, sort of grew up in India. The booking options for any traveler, any consumer, for whether it was a train booking or a flight booking, was either the offline travel agent, or it was actually going and standing in the queue for train booking, going to the reservation office, realizing after you get to the end point that you may not still get the confirmed booking, right? So that used to be and for hotel booking, I think the behavior used to be, and again, I mean, and this is a funny trivia, right? When we IPO'd in US in 2010, and as part of the pitch, a lot of questions would be, what's the consumer behavior in India? How is it different from the Western world or other markets, etc. And when we used to share that the consumer does the hotel booking actually going with family to a particular destination, going up to the hills, and making families sit to a coffee shop or a restaurant, and going to literally physically walk to look at 4 or 5 hotels before they choose hotel. That is how India used to buy a hotel. Back in the days. And I think that is what happened. And specifically for hotels, by the way, the game changer was not. Airlines moved online really, really fast because it was unidimensional. Supply side was consolidated in a bit. I mean, relatively speaking, hotel was hugely fragmented. And then you had low-cost carriers. They needed sort of, I think, they didn't have an intermediary or a tech service provider where they could host content and all that. Distribution cost was important for them, and OTAs came into the picture, and we were able to do direct connects, etc. So do the supply side digitization for them, get the inventory content on the distribution platform, and then sell it to the customers and make it easier and convenient for the consumers. So that was sort of journey, because it was a unidimensional product, standard product, etc. It moved really fast, and maybe the alternative was really, really painful. But hotels, where you didn't really need only the narrow bandwidth, because to sell a hotel online was not easy. Firstly, you didn't have the inventory online, so you needed to do a lot of, because there was hardly any supply side tech that was available. So you needed to do a lot of that, get them to a shape and form that you can actually present it to the consumer on the front end. And then you had to do a lot of work on the changing the consumer habit. So that moved really long. The game changer for hotel business moving online, or the digitization actually in many ways, in many categories taking off in India, was smartphones. And that was very different from the Western world, how Western world sort of moved and evolved in the good old sort of big screen tech world, right? So the desktops and then the iPads and stuff. The moment that smartphone came in, the bandwidth got solved, there was 2G, 3G, 4G, 5G, all that happened. The evolution happened on the bandwidth side. And the technologies then enabled you for you to be able to just give rich content and present all of it in front of the consumer and making it absolutely the consumer journey so convenient, so easy, so transparent for them to be able to adapt. And also a market like India, which is like I don't know, I mean, and we would sometimes sort of feel very surprised and shockingly surprised about it. It's so last minute. We hardly plan for our trip, right? Unlike Europeans, right? I mean, we all know how they plan their trip, right? I finished my first trip, I'm already planning for the second one. Here, I just plan for like 15 days in advance. If that, 30-40% of, by the way, bookings even today are like literally 24 hours, 48 hours. And that is where smartphone came handy, because it was with you 24/7. You're on the move, even if that was the behavior that I want to actually go and do it literally last minute. You can do it on a click of a button, on the move. I've taken my car and I'm already on my way on the highway. I can just do the booking, right? So all of that sort of changed the game for hotel bookings.
So just to put some numbers around, we were talking about this earlier. We heard the number of 1,900 hotels or so, right, in the branded space. Give us a sense of how many hotels are there on your platform?
Yeah, that's a very interesting, and we were just talking about it, very, very interesting. And Manav's presentation talked about in 1,900 hotels, and that's using a different lens. And I know, sort of a lot of the audience here belongs to that sort of set. But the reality, here's the reality, by the way, for a fragmented market like India, and that, to my mind, is also a lot of the headroom for all the people sitting here from a growth perspective, right? And I think we should never lose sort of sight of that big picture as well. So last quarter, by the way, the unique hotels sold on our platform was 66,000, right? So, and these are the numbers or number of hotels sold, got booking, 1 booking or 5 bookings and stuff, right? And the number of hotels listed on our platform will be more than 100,000. Right? And they're all active hotels, and they're all growing. And you would realize that while there will be like big chains who are growing phenomenally and doing fantastic job, but there are like, I don't know, several hundred small chains that are also behind the scenes sort of doing very good business and growing. And because India is a large country, India has a lot of entrepreneurial spirit, as we all know. And there are a lot of serious business when they look at the opportunity on business growth, they get into the business, and then slowly and gradually behind the scene, they keep growing, right? And, and we are glad to be playing a very humble sort of part on that, and just making sure that we enable all those hotels also to be able to sell digitally today, because it's just not easy, because the amount of investment that it takes for you to be able to do that and enable your property to be able to just, from a reach standpoint, reach everywhere, is non-trivial, right?
So in 2005, we had about 2 million passengers.
Yeah.
Right? And we're roughly, 20 million passengers.
20 million,
and we're roughly about 200 million approaching that number today. So we've got 180 million new people, in a manner of speaking, who are traveling today.
Yeah.
And of course, a lot of the growth, as we were talking, accelerated in the last 5 years, right? Or post-COVID also, especially so. Who is this new Indian traveler?
Yeah.
Who's going and buying 66,000 minus 1,900, that gap?
Yeah.
Who's staying there?
Great question, Nikhil. And, I will take you back with what Abhishek was presenting, right? The first slide was demographic dividend, right? And it is rising middle class. I mean, a lot of people have been talking about it, about the rising middle class, as we all know. McKinsey was actually talking about maybe 15 years before, but it is happening now, right? I mean, of course, COVID was the big disruption in between and all of that. But if you really start to look at a large population of India, not necessarily with 1.4 billion, but just look at 500 million, 500 million, and then slice and dice that. and you will realize that there are at least 125 to 150 million households who have disposable income and who have disposable or per capita income more than $10,000. And then there is obviously a subset of that will be more than $20,000, more than $30,000 annual income. Spend more, they can spend more, and that they are the ones. And like I mentioned earlier, right? 80 million life-to-date customers who have actually transacted with us, and obviously we don't have the 100% of the share of the market, right? So, so imagine maybe equal amount of customers if you include rail as a use case, transport use case as well. Will be out there in the market. They are the ones who are driving. So this the sheer size, because the incomes are rising, the country is growing, and there is more disposable income. The other very, very important thing is that within that the superset, you have Gen Z, you have millennials, and you have the working population with let's say 2 years to 10 years sort of work-ex, so 22 years to 38, 40 years, are their buying behavior and their habit in terms of where do they want to spend money, their preferences, where do they want to spend money is completely changing and very different from what we used to do it earlier, right? So if you bring all of this together, the result of that is, and this is hard data, the result of that is that frequent travelers on a MakeMyTrip, pre-COVID, used to do 2.5 on an average trip in a year, are doing 4.5 trip in a year. Within that, a subset used to do 5 or 6 highly frequent travelers are doing 7.5, 8 trips in a year. So clearly the preference is changing. If you look at, and I think that was his second slide as well, and global phenomena, when you do the survey, and what is the first one that comes to your mind where you would want to spend your disposable income today? Travel is right up there, followed by experiences. So I think the world is changing towards, and we're lucky just as an industry to have this situation today where people are just wanting to spend, and maybe COVID has something to contribute to that as well, spending more on travel, experience, having good time rather than just having possessions and so on, right? Yeah. So if you bring in the sheer size and scale of the country, driven by the consumer consumption story of India on the back of rising income, and then the buying behavior changing and the preferences changing, I think it's a very good position to be in, and hopefully will drive
so
in the next.
Two questions coming out of that, just to put some numbers around that.
Yeah.
What is the growth rate you've seen in hotels in terms of gross revenues over the last year, and what do you see it over the next few years?
Yeah. No, good point. And being a listed company, it'll be hard for me to be able to tell you exact data, projected numbers, etc. But I'll tell you directionally, at least the way we look at it. I mean, as part of we just came out of our last year's strategy, and we were just doing a 3-year, 5-year sort of outlook for overall India travel and tourism and for ourselves, and specifically also hotels and airlines, and and some of the stats that you saw presented by STR colleague as well. So 7.5% CAGR for the last 20 years. Yeah. Future outlook, the best case scenario will be double digit. I won't say for the next 25 years, but let's say for the next 5 years, because we will be revisiting and coming back here every year, and we can always look at the scenario again. I think there is a good chance that we might be, and notwithstanding the short-term headwinds, and thanks to whatever geopolitical or the new world phenomenon that is happening right now as we speak, literally. I'm keeping that aside because that I don't think there's only one man can control it. Not anyone else can control it, and hopefully something will happen, some magic will happen, and things will settle down. But if you keep that aside, those are like short-term, volatility, uncertainty that you see. The mid-term to long-term directional outlook looks quite positive, specifically for India. The overall travel and tourism market, the best case scenario, I think double digit. The maybe a average or a not so great scenario will be high single digit, not necessarily low single digit, if you ask me. And you see the supply side investment, everything is sort of lined up for that. Whether it is hotel, look at the expansion plans that everybody is looking at it in anticipation of demand, and it'll play out. you have to take a little bit of a long-term view because, you can't just be investing for, let's say, tomorrow.
I'm going to interrupt you there just in the interest of
Yeah.
time. In terms of types of hotels, very quickly though, and we talked about this briefly, you've seen a big shift away from traditional hotel models, right, into the Airbnb type, homestay type models. What is that trend? How strong is that trend?
No, I think it's pretty strong. It's been there for now a few years, and it was there globally always, and it's sort of catching up in India. From a consumer preference standpoint, I can tell you there are two positive things happening. That there is, because I talked about the Gen Z or the younger population, they're more adventurous, they want to explore more, they want more flexibility. There are new use cases emerging, for every possible, you literally today need an excuse to go with a group and sort of celebrate the celebration use case as we call it. So one good thing is that there are new use cases emerging, which means the overall travel would grow. But there is also sort of demand that is growing for alternative accommodations, if you will, non-hotel kind of accommodation. But my belief is that given that the overall travel and tourism growth, and if we are able to also, like even in the hotels, not necessarily continue to keep following the traditional conventional model, look at and understand and take the trends very seriously, you can actually tweak your products to be able to make it more fit for that kind of audience as well. And therefore, there will be competition in the market, right? But I think they can coexist. I don't really, see this, sort of at the cost of each other, if you ask me.
And to some extent, I think one of the biggest things that you're saying is that supply is also generating demand, right? So
yes.
With the traveler having more options, that person who travels 5 times is going to travel 6 times and 7 times, but he may now go to a homestay, do something different.
No, absolutely.
Great. We're out of time, but Rajesh, thank you and many, many congratulations.
Thank you.
I think
Thank
you made all Indians proud.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you. All right. Thank you.